Alchemy is commonly disregarded as a pseudoscience. However, there was recently a publication in which some scientists, chemists, and historians collaborated to replicate extraction of mercury found in some ancient alchemical texts, and they were actually able to replicate this in the lab currently. And so they were talking about how alchemy is actually better deemed a proto-science or a prequel to our current chemistry rather than a pseudoscience. And I started thinking about the definition of alchemy that we commonly hear: transmutation of base metals such as lead into gold. And I think that leads to sort of the vergence point of alchemy. So I think on one end you can have this sort of like transmutation of physical matter, which is what they were exploring in this PNAS paper. And on the other end, I think you can have this more spiritual side of alchemy, transmutation of base metal into gold, referring to inner alchemy or referring to transmuting pain or seemingly negative experiences into ultimate value. Thinking about this idea of alchemy, I thought I am at the center of a chemist and an alchemist. If you're new here, I am a chemist. I usually create videos talking about the science of skincare, for example. But equally important to me, or even more important to me, is the spiritual side of everything. And in this idea of alchemy, although I guess you could see alchemy more as like metaphysical, but the root is still in a spiritual sense. And I was thinking about how I'm so excited to create this series about alchemy, about transmuting these seemingly negative experiences, but they're actually part of our growth into ultimate wisdom, into true wisdom. I've been working for some time to create an eye look inspired by my favorite fictional character, Kyle Reese from the Terminator. And it was as I was creating this eye look that I realized that he's literally creating alchemy. He is in a continuous surrender to the present moment. He never meets the present moment with resistance. Even though he has this imminent threat, the Terminator, he completely is in every moment. He does whatever needs to be done in every moment to protect Sarah Connor in the film. What's interesting is that he is a soldier from the future, so he travels back in time, but even though he's from the future, he's intensely present. And so he kind of transcends this whole, he transcends time, in my opinion. He transcends fear. He alchemizes fear. And so first I'm just going to add some shades in that represent fear. So I'm using these gray tones. I see this representing the Terminator or Arnold Schwarzenegger. I was thinking, how often do we run from our fears? And we don't want to face them. We don't want to confront them. And obviously we usually don't have something, as intense as like some cyborg from the future, chasing us down. But metaphorically, we can relate to that in several other ways throughout our lives. And so because the Terminator is this like systematic, very mechanical thing that just has one objective in mind,
I'll be back.
I see that kind of like as a representation of the ego mind. And I see Kyle Reese as literally the complete opposite of that, or the antithesis of that, in that he is the opposite of everything mechanical. He's the opposite of everything systematic. He literally operates from the most human, from the true self, I would say. I would call it a higher consciousness. And I believe that, it's kind of the difference between acting from the ego mind versus acting from the heart. And I think that's what Kyle Reese, really shows us. Acting from the heart, even in moments of intense fear. Okay, so here's where the alchemy comes in, and this is how literally how I came upon alchemy. This is what originated this entire idea for me, is that I'm taking this shade called Cyborg, which again is very fitting if you're familiar with the Terminator, and I'm placing that in the center on the eyelid, and I'm seeing this as transmuting fear into presence. So with the example of Kyle Reese, alchemizing fear through presence, through surrender, through the heart, through this higher consciousness, alchemy. And because this is a metallic shade, this is like alchemizing this destructive metal of the Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger, alchemizing the destructive metal of the Terminator into a precious metal. So that's really, when I was creating this eye look, that came to me, and I realized this idea of alchemy. So that is the story of how Kyle Reese led me to alchemy. Kyle Reese transcends the ego mind, transcends this systematic Terminator, transcends the fear. And so as I was thinking about alchemizing this destructive metal of the machine or Terminator into a precious metal, I remembered this song from Sleeping at Last called Mercury. And it actually says at the end, yet I know if I stepped aside, release the controls, you would open my eyes. And that somehow all this mess is just my attempt to know the worth of my life, made of precious metals inside. And I was thinking about how that's again relevant here. This whole idea of surrender. If I stepped aside, if the ego mind, the ego definition of I, would step aside and surrender, and I feel like Kyle Reese embodies that surrender, being in the present moment. And it's also really cool because that song actually has a science fiction reference. It says like science fiction bending truth. I just thought that was a really cool kind of like overlap and parallel. And you know, that song is actually called Mercury, which if you remember back to the beginning, the paper that I referenced where they were talking about the ancient chemistry of mercury and talking about alchemy, that paper was actually about mercury, the extraction of mercury. So a lot of really cool things happened while working on this video, and while stumbling across this idea of alchemy, so many really cool pieces just sort of came together and led me to this journey of alchemy. And so I'm really excited to embark on this journey with you. And so here's the look inspired by Kyle Reese. And this also led me to the highest truth that I have ever experienced, and I will share that with you at the end of the video. But basically, Kyle Reese led me to alchemy and also the experience of the highest truth. So I hope that you'll stick around until the end of the video. It really means a lot to me. And as I was thinking about all of this, I also was inspired to pick up this Wild Unknown Alchemy deck and guidebook by Kim Kranz. The way I see these sort of things is that they are tools that help me get out of my structured ego mind and be open to intuitive wisdom, be open to just seeing beyond my ego's kind of like conditioned ideas, because I felt like there was still stuff that I wanted to say about Kyle Reese's character and see a new perspective on it. So I'm really excited to use this here with you all and see what else we can glean from this character, how we can alchemize fear into presence. So the card I got is Conjunction. You see the infinity symbol. You know what else is interesting? Kyle Reese creates an infinity loop, right? With the time travel. You can see this as past and future. But the truth is, the true essence of Kyle Reese is presence beyond past and future. Presence at the center, and then this whole spectrum of color is shown. And then you see light, then light emanates. It's not that the dark and light, it's not that the dark and the black and white here are not true, but they're not the whole truth. The full truth comes when you see beyond duality and when you come to center. And then light emanates. Then there's transmutation. Then there's alchemy. The other thing I love about this is that there are 3 hearts. So adding a 3rd dimension in, okay, and see the truth beyond duality, then we could see the 3rd dimension or the triquetra, for example. There's also a center to the triquetra. Let's read in the guidebook what Kim Kronz has to say. Konnichiwa is the great alchemical operation of love. During this stage, we witness the miraculous work of 2 opposites merging to create a unique 3rd form. Sun and moon unite to reveal the entire cosmos. Black and white unite to reveal the full spectrum of color. Unlike coagulatio, I probably butchered that, Konnichiwa represents a conscious and benevolent union, one that springs forth from awareness, acceptance, and devotion. It is not a compromise, but rather an activation, a holding of tension and presence that allows each of the entities to thrive and express themselves. Experiencing Konnichiwa is one of the blessings of the human experience, whether the bond is with human, nature, or divinity. Recognize it by the stirring of your heart and an element of surprise. Through opposites arises the infinite. The light, the alchemy, the whole truth lies outside of duality. It's not in this tunnel vision of duality. It's going beyond that, being at the center and seeing beyond the duality. There's another quote from the book The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. You may have heard the Buddhist saying, if there were no illusion, there would be no enlightenment. I feel like that's also relevant here with what we've been talking about. Kyle Reese creates an infinity loop with time, and I feel like that's kind of like the illusion. Time here, I feel, is the illusion, this past and future. He transcends that through the center of these opposites, through his intense presence, and through that he emanates love. I see Kyle Reese also as intense love, and that is the true infinity. The dualistic thinking is only part of the truth. It's a bit of an illusion to only see that, to only see past and future. But he overcomes that through his intense presence, through his intense love. And that is the true infinity. That is the true infinity of Kyle Reese. Yes. I felt like I wanted to also pick the card that was on top of the deck. So the conjunction card kind of just like flew out when I was shuffling the cards. And then I had a card on top of the deck and I picked it up and it was Venus. And maybe I'll talk about that in another video, but I happened to see the note on the side here for the conjunction card. It says, take note if this card appears in the vicinity of the alchemical wedding or the Venus card. If so, the message of love is resonating loud and clear. The fact that this message of love is coming through so clearly is also really profound. And as I talked about in the video, I do several different spiritual practices, I suppose you could call them, that help me get out of my ego mind. For example, I do Laya yoga. Laya is a Sanskrit term that means dissolve. Refers to dissolving the ego. I see it as a way to help me surrender to God's will. And I just recently had the profound experience of Jesus's love and presence. And I hope that over time I can share that with you through these videos. I am sharing this because this is the ultimate truth to me. I have experienced, and I'm so grateful that I have experienced the true presence and love of YESHUA, of Jesus. And I'm so grateful for that. I was in a place of despair, and Jesus ultimately, he's the ultimate alchemizer. To me, he completely transformed me. And I really hope that I can share that love with you all. And another thing, so as we're talking about, the idea of love keeps coming through this video. So another thing I do is to help me kind of get out of sort of this preconditioned egoic way of thinking and open up to a more spiritual guidance, is I like to draw like jewelry charms that have like different images on them, and I see kind of what that artistically kind of represents, and again, it just helps me get out of my ego mind and more into, I feel the true spiritual essence. That's how I view these sort of things. And it was, I wanted to share with you some things that I drew. So first of all, the first time I did it the other day, I drew this circle with these two birds, and I felt like it was referring to oneness. And then again today, again, this is like a bag that has 100 different charms. So the fact that I drew it again is really cool, I think. So I drew this twice. And I realized, one thing I realized was that in this card, I kept saying, I was so focused on this idea of a third dimension because I was thinking about the quote that I was planning to do my next video on. And I even said, oh, I don't know why the hearts approaching the third dimension are also black and white, like representing duality. And then I realized when I drew this, I'm like, oh, I'm still using these egoic structures. You know, it's a model and it's a fair model. But I think to me what this means, the fact that I see these three hearts that I was saying were approaching a third dimension, now that I look at it again, I'm thinking that it means that be careful. That's another way that the ego might try to see reality. But the truth is that it comes to this oneness, which I see in this circle, with these two birds, which I feel like the birds very much are representing love here as well. And then the next thing I drew was this envelope that has a heart. So I felt like it was saying the message of love, which I feel like we've clearly received here. And then I drew this cell phone that has, this cell phone has a clock on it. And on the back, it has a heart. Again, very relevant to what we've been talking about, the whole time travel, transcending time, being present. And again, I feel like both of these symbolize a message of love. And then, okay guys, this is the one that this one took me a little bit to process. At first I didn't really know how to interpret this, and then it hit me all of a sudden. So I'll explain. Earlier in the day, I had been doing some yoga practices, and the Laya yoga that I mentioned. Anyway, as I was doing this yoga movement, I remember thinking to myself, I feel like I'm sewing, weaving, but sewing was definitely the word or the feeling, the presence of YESHUA into my presence. Because I was listening to the song YESHUA. YESHUA is Jesus' name in Hebrew. I was listening to the song YESHUA, and as I was listening to that, I was doing this yoga movement, and I felt intensely that I was sewing Jesus' love and presence into my presence. I don't know how else to say it, but I hope that what I'm saying is coming through. But, and it just hit me. I was like, when I drew this sewing machine, that was very profound. So, again, I know this is probably I know that this is not conventional in any sense, this video. I'm talking about a science fiction character. I'm talking about alchemy. I'm talking about the ego and transcending the ego. I'm talking about Jesus and love. But to me, all of these are true, and to me, Jesus is the ultimate truth, and I am so grateful that I've experienced that. And to me, all of these things are true. And I know that it is being guided by YESHUA, which I know in my heart the truth is that he is the highest consciousness. All of these things I've used here, they're all models. Kyle Reese, a very profound representation of this to me, but it's a model. The makeup artistry is a model. Everything I've used here, like this card that we drew, it's a model of a higher truth. And I'm so grateful. This wisdom that comes through me is from Jesus, from YESHUA.